Welcome back to the On the Grid Podcast, Season 3, Episode 12, Miami Grand Prix edition, or you could say the Influence Grand Prix, the Celebrity Grand Prix, however you want to put it. Yes, we are back for another race review. Joining me, as always, is Adrian Kita. How are you today?
I'm good. I'm very good, thank you. I think we're going to talk a bit about a boring race because I don't think much happened. It was very, very lackluster. Not much happened, but looking forward to for you hosting a race review finally. It's about time.
Finally, yeah. This hasn't been planned. This is just the way it's worked out. It's every single time there's been a race. It's not been my week to host, but finally, we've got a race review I'm hosting. But yeah, like you said, not the most interesting race. I don't know about you, but I felt a little bit sort of demoralised with just how inevitable Red Bull are. Just seeing Verstappen with such ease making his way from 9th to 1st. This isn't the first time a Red Bull's done that. This is the 3rd time in the first 5 races a Red Bull's gone from quite far back to end up in the top 2 spots. It just feels like Red Bull's so far clear that we genuinely could see 23 race wins for them this season.
I think that could be the case. I know that obviously teams are bringing upgrades ahead of the next race weekend in Imola, and it's getting boring now. Seeing them dominating left, right, and centre. It's like the good old Merc days when they dominated and everybody was getting bored. It's starting to become a regular fixture now, where you're just seeing Red Bull just storming 1 and 2, and it's just, come on, we want a bit of a title battle. But the only title battle that we will be probably getting is between the 2 Red Bull drivers, Sergio Perez and Max Verstappen. No one else. Well, Fernando Alonso is about 30 points behind, but still, if Red Bull continue winning, it's only going to go 1 or 2 ways, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. At least in the Mercedes day, you had a bit of a conflict between Hamilton and Rosberg, and there was a bit of jeopardy there, but it doesn't seem like the Red Bulls are getting tangled together too much this season, which is a shame for the spectator, for the neutral, at the hope of seeing someone different win. Maybe a Fernando Alonso get his first win in a decade. But moving on to the Miami race, well, starting off with qualifying, and in Q1 we had exiting Logan Sargent, yet again another Q1 elimination, Oscar Piastri, Lance Stroll in an Aston Martin getting knocked out in Q1, Yuki Tsunoda and Lando Norris to make it yet another double McLaren Q1 exit. Let's start off with McLaren. Do you think the last 2 races in Baku and Australia were a bit of a false start for McLaren? They brought some upgrades. It looked like their pace was a bit better, and then in Miami they were nowhere again. Do you think it's a case of McLaren struggling dependent on the track, or is there something bigger?
I think we're saying that it's very track dependent, but I believe in practice they were doing relatively okay, and I was quite shocked to see them both eliminated in Q1, especially Lando Norris. But yeah, it is tricky with McLaren at the moment. They are having a bit of a tough time with it. Like you say, they've bought upgrades along the way, but I think they'll need to plough through all the upgrades possible. Because at the start of the season, it was like a garbage truck. Now it's probably like a camper van. That McLaren car, if you want to put a comparison to it. So for them to get to race car level, I think they've got to get as many upgrades possible and as quickly as possible, because they are in danger of going backwards, and they have gone backwards already. But if they want to progress that car throughout the season, they've got to really, really put all their effort into this season, because they are really, really on the back foot. And I think from pre-season testing up to this point, they've really been on the back foot, and they've been hampered with the garbage truck / camper van car that they've got at the moment.
Yeah, when they, after that Australia race and everything looked a bit better, it may have been a little bit misleading, because they did get quite fortunate in that race with all of the crashes and the safety cars and the red flags we had. It'll be interesting to see how they do over the triple header coming up with Imola, Spain and Monaco, to see how they fare at those 3 tracks. Also going out of Q1, as I said, Lance Stroll. Now, if this was a type of performance he put in at the start of the season, you can almost forgive him with his broken wrists. But now he's seemingly all healed, all fine, and he's not getting out of Q1 in an Aston Martin, which is the second best car on the grid, especially this weekend, as we saw. What do you make of Stroll's weekend?
I don't know if you can be surprised anymore with Lance Stroll being eliminated from Q1. Fernando Alonso, of course, is dragging that team forward. Aston Martin is dragging it on its back, and he's putting it on its back, and he's gained the most points for the team. Lance Stroll, like we said the previous couple of weekends, he's just been nowhere. He's just been nowhere in terms of his teammate. And once again, in Miami, we saw that happening again. He's been nowhere compared to his teammate. Fernando Alonso obviously qualified second. He qualified 18th on the grid. I mean, on a whole for the weekend, it wasn't as bad because he climbed into the points. But qualifying per se, nowhere. And I think it just pinpoints Lance Stroll as a whole. His qualifying performances have been awful. They've been tragic compared to Fernando Alonso. But his race performances have kind of helped him because Aston Martin have such a rapid car. He can make his way through the field, which is what has kind of helped him get most of the bulk of his points. Because if it was down to just his qualifying performances, then he could be in serious trouble. But then again, we're talking about Lance Stroll. His dad owns the team. Is he ever going to be in trouble? Probably not.
Yeah, we said about this in the predictions video for Miami and the Baku post race. It's just not good enough, really, is it? He's in the second quickest car, especially at Miami. The Aston Martin was by far the second quickest car, and then to not even get in Q1, not even get out of Q1, sorry, it's just not good enough, as you've said. Didn't get any points, made up the same amount of positions in Yuki Tsunoda in the race in the AlphaTauri, which is arguably the worst car on the grid. But yeah, Yuki Tsunoda was also out in Q1. I think he got a little bit unlucky with the timing of the laps and how that went down. Then moving on to Q2, Nick De Vries in 15th, first time he's outqualified his teammate this season. Guan Yu Zhou in 14th. Lewis Hamilton, the big one, out in 13th place. They were in danger in Q1, Mercedes, and then both cars struggled in Q2. But I have to say, I'm criticising the strategy from the garage for this one. When you put your cars out for 2 laps, one at the start, one at the end, you're always opening yourself up to potentially getting knocked out. You know, if you don't hook up your first lap up right, which the Mercedes didn't compared to the other teams where there was a lot of track evolution. Teams came out later and they put in quicker times, and then coming out at the end, if you make one little mistake, you're out. We've seen this time and time again. Like we'll get onto Q3 in a minute, but look at what the struggles people had that were starting further back because they didn't put in that banker lap, and then there was a problem at the end of the session. What do you make of Hamilton's performance?
I think Hamilton summed it up pretty well on his team radio. I think he said don't quote me, but I believe he said, I think you left it a little bit too late, guys. And I think he pinpoints it right there. They've left him little time to hook up 1 or 2 laps. Like we said, that banker lap is crucial, and I don't think he got that crucial banker lap in to get himself amongst the top 10. And then obviously they left him a little bit too late, which didn't allow him to get in maybe an out lap and a quick lap and an out lap and another quick lap. You never know. It's hard to put it into perspective because with Hamilton, once again, you're expecting Mercedes to be in and amongst the top 5, top 6 as the top 3 teams. But it was just hard for him. I think it was a tough weekend for him. We're obviously going to the race a little bit later and kind of see how he got up to in the race, which was a mega drive, can I say. It was a very good drive from him. But I just think in qualifying, like you say, garage, think a little bit too less communication. I think you give what the drivers want. And I think Hamilton would have been screaming in the garage going, right, guys, there's X amount of minutes left. Can we get out on track? And I think they've left it a little bit too late. That's why he didn't make it out Q2 and into Q3.
Yeah, especially because we saw a lot of cars getting hampered by traffic at other parts of the lap and not being able to put in a good enough lap. But also out in Q2, Nico Hülkenberg in 12th and Alex Albon yet again outperforming that Williams, putting himself up into 11th place compared to his teammate who qualified last. Moving on to Q3 then. Valtteri Bottas. Now, we've criticised him a lot, but I thought it was a better performance from him last weekend in Miami. He got into Q3. We'll get onto the race later, but it's a step in the right direction, isn't it?
It's about time. It's about time VB finally got into Q3 because we've been slating him, and I think he's finally heard our calls and answered our prayers and kind of just put that slowly to bed. Obviously, the race wasn't a fantastic performance, but qualifying, he showed up his consistency, his experience, and what he's built on for these X amount of years that he's been in Formula One. So yeah, it was good to see Valtteri Bottas back in Q3. I think he deserves a place in Q3, alongside one more name, because obviously the top 4 teams occupy usually the top 8 places. Lance Stroll obviously being the anomaly last weekend in Miami. But yeah, it was good to see him back, and I think he'll have a good run of Q2/Q3 appearances ahead. Hopefully, fingers crossed.
Well, yeah, it was actually his first Q3 appearance. We praised him up on the first race of the season in Bahrain for doing a great job to finish best of the rest in 8th. But he didn't even qualify in the top 10 for Bahrain. Then moving on to the rest of the session, Max Verstappen didn't get in a time as well as Bottas. They saved it to the last second. I think Verstappen made a mistake on his first lap, decided to abort the lap, didn't stay out for that to get in the banker lap, and was hampered not by Esteban Ocon, who qualified in 8th, but by Charles Leclerc in 7th. I think he also had a poor first banker lap, and if this weekend has shown anything, it's how important a banker lap is at the start of the qualifying session. Charles Leclerc in 7th, and then obviously caused the red flag and the end of Q3 at the end there. It wasn't the first time he's made that mistake either. He had a spin at the end of free practice 2, I believe it was. What do you make of Leclerc? Because it's seeming I think one big criticism is that he's always liable to a mistake.
I think during qualifying, we were obviously messaging one another. And as soon as Charles Leclerc put it in the wall, I was like, yeah, that's going to be the mistake that kind of hampered him. Obviously, we saw it in practice. He did it in practice, and I messaged you as well, going, right, that's his only mistake this weekend. He's already binned it in the wall. Qualifying comes along, bam, crucial moment. But also, can I say, Martin Brundle, David Croft, commentators curse. They had him on the TV director and he binned it. The commentators curse strikes again. Can you do it on Verstappen or someone else, please? Because it's getting boring now. It's always on Charles Leclerc. Like, come on.
Yeah, it was the fact that they were hyping it up, because obviously it's Miami. It attracts a load of interest which might not necessarily be there for the rest of the season. And Martin Brundle hyping it up and goes something along the lines of, this is Formula One at its peak. And then 5 seconds later, you see Leclerc spinning off. A little bit unfortunate there. For the rest of the top 6, so George Russell qualifying in 6th, Pierre Gasly, a remarkable job qualifying in 5th place. Kevin Magnussen, though, 4th place qualifying in that Haas. Carlos Sainz in 3rd, pretty comfortably from K-Mag. Fernando Alonso getting another front row start, and Sergio Perez on pole. Now, we did think going into the race, we thought, okay, well, Perez should find this pretty simple to grab the win, and then it's a toss-up between Alonso and Sainz for who's competing over that last podium spot. Didn't quite work out that way. Max Verstappen stormed through field pretty comfortably, you have to say. He didn't actually have to do a whole lot. It seemed, as we said at the start, it seemed very inevitable that he was going to make his way through, not only take up a large portion of the race, but he'd done it within about 15 laps. He was second by lap 15 or something, or around there. What do you make of Verstappen's performance? Do you think it was as good as it seems on paper, or do you think it was more down to the car?
It was too easy. It was very, very simple. That Red Bull car is like a rocket ship. Fernando Alonso predicted Max Verstappen to pass him by lap 25, and he did it 10 laps before. So Mystic Fernando couldn't strike again, unfortunately, like he did in Saudi Arabia. But I think it's down to 2 things. It's down to the car, and it's down to Max Verstappen just being able to spread it through and pass everyone. Obviously, we saw, I think his best overtake was when he passed Pierre Gasly and George Russell down the start-finish straight. Like the speed of that Red Bull plus the precision that Verstappen had to do to pull that overtake off. Fantastic. It was very, very good. But I think it was, apart from qualifying, I think it was pretty much a near perfect weekend for Verstappen. I think it's better to see him starting further back because we can actually see some overtakes, whereas in Miami we didn't really see very much overtaking apart from the DRS straights. But yeah, very good performance for Verstappen, and once again he kind of reclaims that advantage at the top of the championship where he's been, where it seems he's going to stay there and it's going to just be him leading for the rest of the season. But hopefully it's not, and hopefully we see more battles coming up within the next few race weekends. But Max Verstappen, once again, pretty much perfect weekend.
Yeah, 14-point lead now at the top of the championship, ahead of his teammate Sergio Perez, who, although Verstappen was on the optimal strategy, hard to medium, Perez did not have a great race, I thought. He was barely pulling away from Alonso and Sainz. He was only a few seconds ahead of them by the time of the first pit stops. And then with Verstappen on old hards, Perez was slow. Verstappen came out, I think he put on like 40 or something. He came out a second behind Perez, which if you're Sergio Perez, if you're going to compete for a world championship, this can't be happening. He needs to make this advantage. He needed to make the advantage count. It's not very often that Max Verstappen is going to be qualifying out of position. He's not going to be qualifying outside the top three very many occasions this season. So when he qualifies in 9th, you have to win that race if you're Sergio Perez starting on pole. And then to add insult to injury, he didn't even pit for the fastest lap. He had a pit stop to Alonso, over a pit stop. I think he had about 25 seconds to Alonso, and he didn't even pit to get that extra point and take it away from Verstappen. So instead of having an 8-point deficit, which is what he had, it would only be a 6-point deficit to Verstappen. A confusing one. Very confusing one. What do you make of the other side of the garage at Red Bull?
I think Perez still lacks that hunger and desire that is needed for a good championship battle. Like we say, even though Verstappen did have the optimal strategy, I think it should have potentially gone Perez's way with Perez and P1, but obviously the garage is going to have preferential treatment to Max Verstappen because we know he's gunning for his 3rd world championship. So why change it? Why change it and keep it? Change it to Sergio Perez when you've got a very good chance of Max Verstappen storming through the field and getting the race victory anyway. But yeah, I don't think it was the best of performances for Sergio Perez. Obviously, he found it hard to pull away and kind of gain an advantage over Fernando Alonso and Carlos Sainz in the opening exchanges. And then when Verstappen came onto the scene, you just saw that Perez's head was going to drop. I don't even think he kind of battled for the race lead when on lap 44 when Max Verstappen swooped around him. I was hoping that they were going to collide. I was really, really hoping that Perez would put a wheel down Max Verstappen's inside, but he didn't, and Max Verstappen just kind of drove away into the distance. So I think Perez is just lacking that hunger, that desire. Obviously, we've seen him get race victories before, but to really battle with Verstappen for the championship, he needs that hunger and desire. And I think if you have an angry Mexican, I think you get the most out of him. And I think Sergio Perez needs to enter that angry Mexican to kind of propel himself back into the championship frame. There's still a bit of a deficit, and we're not even a third into the season. So I think there's a long way to go, and I think Sergio Perez can still battle for the championship, but he needs that hunger and desire to kind of propel him forward.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. Moving on to 3rd place, a man with a lot of hunger, Fernando Alonso, a 4th podium of the season. Every weekend this season, Fernando Alonso has picked up 15 points. Even when he didn't get the podium, which was at Baku, he got 3 points from the sprint race, which gave him 15 points. He seemed very comfortable in 3rd, didn't he? He never, even when he was battling Sainz, and then I think Russell was closing at one stage, it never looked like anybody else but Alonso was going to finish 3rd.
Yeah, I think Fernando kind of had a bit of a lonely race when he got away from Sainz and claimed 3rd place. Like we even saw him looking at the TV screen to see Lance Stroll making moves on behind him. So yeah, it was comfortable for Fernando Alonso, and I think he's back to where he belongs, which is another third place finish. He's got four out of his last five where he's got onto the podium. So very consistent. I think he could be called Mr. Consistent at this rate because he's just grinding out them podiums, and hopefully there'll be a second place to come. And then after that, a race victory for the first time in a decade. So fingers crossed for Fernando. But I think it's another customary Fernando Alonso performance. Third place finish. Very good in qualifying, and he's back where he belongs, fighting for podiums and potentially for race victories very soon.
Let's hope so, yeah. It'll be nice to see Alonso back on the top step. And then moving on to fourth place, George Russell. I think he performed very well this weekend as a whole. He had that slight mistake in qualifying. Maybe he should just be starting in fourth place ahead of Magnussen and Gasly. But he made the moves. He made a very good move on Carlos Sainz, and if these Mercedes upgrades, which are rumoured for Imola, work out, you could see George Russell battling on the podium. Then in fifth place, now I think this man had quite a disappointing drive considering where he started. Carlos Sainz, he was battling Alonso during the first stint, and then received that very, very stupid penalty to receive speeding in the pit lane. And then it sort of all unraveled from there, didn't it?
Yeah, I just don't know what's up with Carlos Sainz. The consistency is simply just not there. Qualifying, I think he obviously made up for the red flag with Charles Leclerc, and obviously was the lead Ferrari, and then in a race dropping behind obviously Verstappen, who came through the field, and George Russell. It was sort of disappointing for myself. I think Ferrari are in whole heaps of trouble at the moment. There seem to be absolutely nowhere in terms of tyre management. The race pace just seems to be absolutely nowhere as well. And I just think that Carlos just had nothing to help him defend against Alonso and Russell. I think the two of them were just supremely better, and they made their moves on Sainz, and Sainz dropped to fifth. Nevertheless, he's still got points. He's still managed to get some points, but I think he needs a bit of consistency and stability to get himself back amongst the podium, because I think he's been out of the podium frame for quite a while. So hopefully he can just bring that consistency and that hunger, like I said with Sergio Perez regarding a title battle, a hungry and a desirable Carlos Sainz, I think, will be able to deliver podiums, but it just depends on the car and the circuit. I think there's some circuits that drivers are better and some circuits that drivers are worse. So I think that could be said for Carlos Sainz with Miami. But then again, there should be no excuses. You should be executing. You should be getting a fourth place finish. Never mind Verstappen obviously coming through the field. You should be getting fourth place ahead of George Russell, and you shouldn't be making mistakes like that coming into the pit lane and getting yourself a 5-second time penalty.
Yeah, I'm not necessarily sure I think he's been inconsistent. I just think he hasn't been consistently quick enough. If you look at his results this season, he got fourth in Bahrain, sixth in Jeddah, then he got 12th in Australia, but that was obviously hampered by that penalty where he was running in fourth, and then back-to-back fifth place finishes. The problem is he's not showing that pace to be going on and challenging for the podium positions. He's got consistent points for Ferrari. He's just lacking that bit of edge where maybe, like we see Fernando Alonso getting into the podium and Lewis Hamilton got on the podium and Leclerc last weekend getting into that. He's just lacking that little bit of extra pace.
But I think, yeah, you're saying that little bit of extra pace, but I think Ferrari are struggling with pace at the moment. So I think if you're eliminating that aspect, yes, he's got points on a kind of consistent basis, but for him to be able to get podiums or even dream of getting a race victory once again, the car has to improve, and the car currently that Ferrari have is going backwards and is falling down a spiral, because Aston Martin have gone up, Mercedes have gone up. Ferrari need to implement something for them not to go backwards and make a step forward instead of making 2 steps backwards.
That point. Sixth place, Lewis Hamilton, a great drive through the field, started in 13, was on the optimal strategy of hard to medium. Most of that first stint was quite frustrating to watch. Hamilton was stuck in a queue of sort of 4 or 5 cars, but then towards the end, when they pitted, he stayed out a little bit longer, had some better pace, then pulled off some very good overtakes towards the end, including one which I don't think he would have liked in those last few laps on Charles Leclerc, which I thought was a great move down the inside. And I don't know what turn number it is, but it's at the end of the first DRS section. So yeah, I'd say a very good weekend for Lewis Hamilton. And then moving on to Charles Leclerc, I don't think I can remember a worse weekend for Leclerc in recent memory. I don't know what you think. I don't know if you want to take the lead on this one, but I thought he had quite a disappointing weekend and want to put it behind him.
Well, he struggled behind Kevin Magnussen, for God's sake. What can you say? I won't say it was a bad weekend. I think it was just more of a very mediocre weekend. He obviously was stuck behind K-Mag. He obviously had a battle with Lewis Hamilton near the end and lost out in that battle. Qualified 7th, finished 7th. He made no places whatsoever in the race. I think one of only 3 drivers to do that, with the other 2 being Oscar Piastri and Logan Sargent, who were P19 and P20, for God's sake. What can you say? Really, what can you say? I have no words. It's tough as a Ferrari fan at the moment. I think I've already pointed it out there. We need upgrades. We need something to happen because our tyre management is nowhere to be seen. Our race pace is nowhere to be seen from last season. There's just nothing to be positive about. We are going backwards. We're not making steps forwards. We are going backwards. And it's scary because the last time we fought for a championship was Fernando Alonso. And he's at Aston Martin. And it's been over a decade. It's tough. It's very, very hard. But for Leclerc, it's the same as Carlos Sainz. There's no hunger. There's no desire. The Ferrari is going backwards. It's just not making any steps forwards. And hopefully with a triple header, with an Italian race, can I hope for a podium? Is it a long shot? Maybe not in front of an Italian crowd. It's probably not a long shot. I think the fans can help the 2 Scuderias forward, but it's just tough. I think it's just tough for Ferrari. I'm done with my rant. It's over. We've done the Leclerc section. I've done my rant. Thank you.
Yeah, I didn't actually realise he was only one of 3 drivers to not change position throughout that race. Yeah, that's quite a damning statistic. Yeah, you've got the triple header. I think is the only good news. You can put it behind you quite quickly and not dwell on it for too long, especially when you've got Imola, which is I think geographically Ferrari's home race, distance wise, and then the home race for both of your drivers, which I don't know if the one for Leclerc is going to be is a good sign or not based on his track record there. However, then again, I wouldn't be surprised to see him put it on pole in Monaco, to be honest. I think we saw it a couple of years ago where he put it on pole in a Ferrari, which was not good enough to be putting that car on pole. And obviously he couldn't start that race. Moving on to rounding off the points, Pierre Gasly and Esteban Ocon, both in the Alpines, finishing best of the rest in 8th and 9th. Really as good as they could have hoped for, I think. Gasly dropped a few positions at the end. I thought he was very impressive, though. Starting 5th, held off Leclerc, especially for quite a few laps, but eventually got overtaken. And then Esteban Ocon as well started in 8th, finished in 9th. So when you consider you had Max Verstappen, Lewis Hamilton fighting through the field, it's not that bad. Not too bad a performance. And then Kevin Magnussen rounding off the points as well. Finished P10. Very good battle with Leclerc, as you alluded to earlier. I thought that Haas looked quite racy at Miami, and I thought it was a good performance from K-Mag.
Yeah, in generally speaking, K-Mag did very well. Obviously dropped 6 positions, which obviously from 4th place, you're not expecting a Haas to finish 4th, are you, realistically? He was obviously able to fend off Yuki Tsunoda in the final few laps to gain the final point. So all in all, I think K-Mag will be happy with a point. I don't think he can complain with a point. It's another point for the championship. How many times am I going to say point in a sentence? That is a question. But yeah, overall, I think K-Mag did very well. He's not going to be expected much more from a race with the top 4 teams obviously fighting for the top 8 places, should I say? So yeah, positive overall. K-Mag will be happy with a point.
Moving on to the drivers who finished just outside the points. Yuki Tsunoda, another fantastic performance, going from 17th to 11th. Another 11th place finish. He seems to be able to only finish in 10th or 11th, Tsunoda. I thought, it's another fantastic drive from probably one of the most consistent drivers on the grid this season, probably one of the best performing drivers, because look how Nick De Vries is struggling in that car, and Tsunoda was consistently on the border of the points, finishing 10th or 11th in these first 5 races. It's a step in the right direction that Tsunoda needed, especially after 2 seasons where arguably he hasn't reached the levels he should have.
Well, he's taken the leadership role at AlphaTauri now, hasn't he? With Nick De Vries obviously being the older one, but the less experienced one in Formula One. So I think that's beginning to show for Yuki Tsunoda, and I think he's kind of been unlucky but lucky in the same sentence, because he's been very, very consistent, being just outside the points, but he's been very unlucky not to get points. And I think he's only got 1 point so far. I think 1 10th place finish, or 2 points. Okay, 2 points. Still,
second point in Baku.
Yeah, you're right. You are correct. Thanks for clarifying. But yeah, he's unlucky but lucky in the same sense, and I think it is a step in the right direction for Yuki Tsunoda. He just needs to kind of give that little bit more oomph to get into the points and potentially race with the Alpines or the Haas's in the coming races. But very good performance once again. Unfortunate not to get a point. Obviously was battling with K-Mag in the latter exchanges, I believe, of a race. So yeah, long may it continue. A step in the right direction, and hopefully more points to come for Yuki.
Yeah, from a very good performance to what can only be described as a shambolic performance, I'd say. Lance Stroll, 12th, as we've mentioned earlier. 12th in the second quickest car. He made up the same amount of positions as Yuki Tsunoda, and less positions than Lewis Hamilton. So it's not as if he was even cutting his way through the field. I know it was difficult with there was a big DRS chain, but that car should be getting points. It doesn't matter whether you start last, you should be able to get points in that car. Fernando Alonso, if he started 18th, I would say he would have probably finished 7th or 8th, to be perfectly honest. I think that, Lance Stroll is not pulling his weight when you compare the contribution from the 2 drivers. But maybe that's what Aston Martin want. They don't want, obviously, Lawrence Stroll wants his son to have a seat, and they have that star-studded name in Fernando Alonso. They also want to keep him happy with, not really having competition there. But, I think Lance Stroll really put in a poor performance from what could be argued a decent first few races to the season.
I just have one very good quote to summarise Lance Stroll. If I speak, I'm in big trouble, big trouble. And I don't want to be in big trouble, because it's just, what on earth is happening with Lance? Like, we know that he's not Fernando Alonso level, but come on, one of the quickest cars on the grid, and you can't even get into the points, making up the same amount of positions as Yuki Tsunoda. I'm just lost for words. It's like, we need to get used to this, because Lance, if he qualifies, if he doesn't make Q2 or Q3, then it's likely he's going to finish outside the top 10. We've just got to simply get used to it and put up with it, because I think, like you alluded to, Aston Martin just want that. They want a clear number 1 and a clear number 2. Lance won't be happy with that, of course, with his dad owning the team, but you've got to do what you've got to do to have a seat in Formula One, and I think Lance has to make sacrifices in one way or another.
You may not like it, but, there's an argument to say he doesn't deserve to be in the second quickest car on the grid, between the second and fourth car on any given weekend. We've seen him in the third quickest car before, in 2020 at Racing Point, and he was completely beaten by his teammate, beaten by a whole host of other cars, the McLarens, Renaults as well, and wasn't good enough, and cost his team really a lot of money in constructors' points by not finishing third in the constructors overall. So we've seen it before, so it shouldn't really be any surprise to anybody. 13th place, Valtteri Bottas. Now, we said earlier, it's a better response. However, I'd be honest, I think this should be the standard for Bottas. Started 10th, finished 13th. He had quicker cars coming through, so it may not be fully down to his performance alone. But this this should be a 6 out of 10 performance really for Valtteri Bottas. It's a decent job, but not really good enough, as we've spoken about earlier. Someone who will be disappointed, I'm sure, Alex Albon. He missed a trick really at the start. He wasn't on the optimal strategy. Started on the mediums, and then obviously slipped back because the hards actually held up very well, and then cars were quicker at the end on the mediums. What do you make of Alex Albon?
Hands in the air. It is what it is. I don't think you can be upset with 14. Especially with Stroll and with Hamilton coming through. You're realistically looking at 13, 14 for the Williams of Albon. So I don't think he'd be too upset with it, and I don't think he'll be too disappointed with it. He won't be happy, of course. He's gunning for points. He's wanting to put that Williams car into the points more or less every week. He's a lot more confident in that car, and I think that car has made steps in the right direction. But I think it was unrealistic for him to be any higher than 13th, 14th. I think he'll be happy where he's finished, and I think it's another race into the catalogue of races, and he just needs to just go ahead, keep it up, keep going, and kind of look ahead to this triple header as right. I've got a chance of consistency here with 3 races back to back to back.
Yeah, I'm not sure about Monaco. I think it doesn't really suit the Williams car, especially being quite downforce reliant. So I think he could struggle there. But, Spain and Imola are 2 good opportunities to be fighting for points again. And then moving on to 2 drivers who I thought were quite anonymous this weekend. Nico Hülkenberg, 15th, and Guan Yu Zhou, 16th. Hülkenberg, not really as good as his teammate, and then Guan Yu Zhou as well. Both slipped back during the race, and I don't really have much to say about them, to be honest. And then 2 cars that were very disappointing, as we spoke about at the start. McLaren's Lando Norris in 17th and Oscar Piastri in 19th. As we said earlier, I think they could be at risk of slipping backwards. There's an argument there as well, as long with AlphaTauri and Williams. They actually had the worst car in Miami, and it was only performance of two good drivers, which saw them not finish 19th and 20th, to be honest.
They are at risk of slipping back. And to simply put it, their car is just not good enough this season. Simply put it. Like I said at the start of the episode, they need upgrades, and they need them quickly, because if they don't put upgrades into that car, they will probably be the worst car on the grid. And in Miami, I think they were the worst car on the grid. I'm not putting the performance of Logan Sargent and Nick De Vries in there. The Williams and the AlphaTauri performed admirably with Yuki Tsunoda and Alex Albon. So I think in Miami, they were the worst car on the grid, full stop, nothing more said.
Yeah, bitterly disappointing after showing some signs of promise. And then the final 2 drivers were all 20 drivers classified, by the way. The first time in who knows how long that's happened. But I cannot remember any race where there's been all 20 drivers classified. Nick De Vries in 18th. It was a better qualifying performance, I think we'll say, for Nick De Vries. And then he crashed into turn 1. So he didn't wait too long to get his weekly crash out of the way. And then finishing in 20th. One of only 2 cars to be lapped, Logan Sargent. Another poor performance. We looked at Bahrain when he finished up in 12th, and we thought, he looks like a decent driver. But since then, his highest finish is 16th. So not really good enough from Sargent, especially with his teammate, bordering on Q3, and then ultimately being unlucky with strategy, which cost him a fight for points. What do you make of the 2 rookies? Weekends.
Let's start with Nick De Vries, shall we? After an absolute disaster class in Azerbaijan, I think it was a little bit better in qualifying. The race wasn't so good. Obviously crashing into turn 1 like an absolute numpty. But for Logan Sargent, I think it's a continuation of struggles. In one of the 3 home races that he's got this season. Kota and Las Vegas being the other 2 coming up. He had a lot of pressure coming into this race, I feel, obviously being in front of his home crowd, but then again, it's a rookie, so you're not expecting much from him. And the expectation was kind of there. you're not expecting much from him. There you go, P20 slapped right in front of your face. So I think it's going to be a tricky start for Logan Sargeant with life in Formula One, but it could be a start and a finish if he doesn't pick up his performances in the rest of the season, because obviously it could be a 1-season thing, it could be a 2-season thing. It depends on James Vowles, the team principal, if he wants Logan Sargeant in for another season. So Miami was tricky for Logan Sargeant and Nick De Vries as well, but they've just got to keep plugging away, and obviously the 3 rookies were classified 18th, 19th and 20th, so all of them found it hard. Obviously, they've not raced at this track per se in any of the junior formulas, so they're going to find it hard to adapt, and we clearly saw that. They found it hard to adapt and finished in the bottom 3.
Yeah, difficult race for the 3 rookies in Miami. So moving on to our 1 to 10 rankings for the Miami Grand Prix. So kicking things off, Max Verstappen, P9 to P1, I'm going to give him a 9 out of 10. Don't think it was quite a 10 out of 10 performance, but you can't argue with starting in 9th and winning the race.
Yeah, I gave him a 9.5. I think it was close to being perfect for me. But I think we're kind of getting used to Max Verstappen coming through the field and finishing P1. I think it's what we're used to these days. And yeah, I gave him a 9.5 out of 10.
Yeah, especially given the car he's got underneath him. Sergio Perez, I was quite disappointed with Perez, to be honest. I gave him a 7 out of 10, but I think I might actually be a little bit too nice there.
Nice. I mean, he qualified P1. And he finished P2.
He qualified P1 because his teammate didn't put in a lap. He's in the quickest car, and he was only 2 seconds ahead of Alonso at the pit stops.
Yeah, so realistically, if his teammate puts a lap in, he's qualifying P2 and he's finishing P2.
In the Red Bull, which is so far clear of any other car.
Yeah, but what are you expecting? Max Verstappen storm through the field. Of course he's going to win the race.
With his teammates starting in 9th, you expect him to win that race. It's a, if...
No.
When the car is so dominant, if he's not, and his teammates qualifying down in 9th place, if he's not winning that race, it's nothing. It's a poor performance in my eyes. I've given him an 8 out of 10. Just to clarify, I've given him an 8. Clarify we'll compromise there for a 7.5. But yeah, I think it was a poor weekend for Sergio Perez. Fernando Alonso on the contrast. For me, I gave him a 9 out of 10. I thought it was an exceptional performance. Very close to a 10 out of 10. I was having a little thought whether I'd give him a 10 out of 10, but I've gone for a 9 out of 10. So I'm saving that for, a first or second place for Alonso.
9 out of 10 as well for me. I think the same reasons you just said there. I don't think I need to add much more.
Yeah. 4th place, George Russell. I gave him as well a 9 out of 10. I might be being a little bit too nice. Maybe it's a little bit of Mercedes bias, but I just don't know if there was much more he could have done. Yeah, I wasn't expecting him to beat Sainz, to be honest. I thought he'd done well to even be challenging with Sainz, given the pace given the advantage the Ferraris had. Russell got caught in traffic a little bit in the first stint as well. I thought it was a very good performance.
I've given George Russell an 8.5 out of 10. I've taken the half a point down from the Mercedes biased man. I think I'd agree with you completely. I think George Russell had a fantastic performance. In Miami, obviously, he couldn't have done much more. Well, maybe he could have fought Fernando Alonso if he wasn't stuck in traffic and whatnot. But realistically, qualifying 6th and finishing 4th place, I think it's as best as George could have done. So an 8.5 out of 10 for me. I'm happy to compromise with an 9.
Yeah, I think I'll knock it down to an 8.5. Maybe I'm being a little bit biased there, so maybe take the bias aside, and it is actually an 8.5. Carlos Sainz in 5th place, 7 out of 10. I thought it's solid points for Ferrari. He got the penalty, which I have to knock a point off because it was of his own doing as well. It wasn't a racing incident. It wasn't anything out of his control. It was his mistake. He was trying to undercut Alonso, and it ended up backfiring for him. Plus, in that second stint, he did drop off a lot, and he only actually finished on track 15 seconds ahead of Leclerc. And, Leclerc had, such a difficult weekend.
What did you give Sainz again? A 7?
7 out of 10.
I've given him a 6.
Ooh. Okay.
I've given him a 6 out of 10. it might be my pessimism kicking in ever so slightly. Like you said, obviously the penalty was his own wrongdoing. Easily avoidable. But I think you simply have to finish in and around the top three. I think that you have to keep up pace with Fernando Alonso, and I think you don't let George Russell come past. Simple as. I think if you're, like I said, starting from P3, George Russell started from P6. Realistically, Carlos Sainz, for me to give him a 7 or an 8 out of 10, he finishes P3 minimum, and he simply didn't do that. Yes, he got some points for Ferrari, which is a positive for me. But I think that for me, minimum P3 or P4. For me to give him a 7 or an 8, and he just didn't deliver that.
Who would have thought that after what we were saying earlier on? Lewis Hamilton 6. I've given him an 8 out of 10. I thought he battled through the field very well. I can't really fault the way he made his way through the field. Obviously, he got stuck in traffic at the start. Would have been disappointed and to not be able to push higher on and maybe close that gap to Sainz a little bit, put him under a bit of pressure with that 5-second penalty as well. But he just run out of time, I think. I think him given another 5-10 laps, he would have closed that gap and, been thereabouts for 5th place.
So the driver that made the second most amount of positions behind Max Verstappen, who made up 8, Lewis Hamilton made up 7. I've given him a 9 out of 10. I think, I know. I've given him a 9 out of 10. I was impressed with his. Well, I mean, I say I was impressed with his overtake on Leclerc. I was actually quite angry when he overtook Leclerc. But nevertheless, like you say, a very, very good drive through the field. Obviously, qualifying wasn't his best, but finishing not far away. Well, I say not far away. He was a few seconds back from Carlos Sainz in P5. And if he made it to P5, it could have been a 9.5 for me. But a 9 out of 10, I think. Yeah, good racing, good overtaking. And a good finish in P6.
Yeah, he was 9 seconds behind Sainz with the penalty. So not too bad performance, I wouldn't say. Charles Leclerc, 5 out of 10.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. I thought 5 out of 10, bog standard, average. I don't have anything else to say. Can we just move on?
Yeah, okay, moving swiftly on then. Pierre Gasly, I've given him an 8 out of 10. Best of the rest. 8th place finish, 8 out of 10 for me.
I've given him a 7.5. I think from the woes of Azerbaijan, where we absolutely slated him and ripped into him, I think he's done very well to recover from that weekend. So a 7.5 from me.
Yeah, straight off the bat as well. Not even any time to think about it. The following weekend, much better performance. Esteban Ocon, I gave him slightly lower than Pierre Gasly because obviously he didn't have as good a qualifying. 7 out of 10.
Yeah, I've given Esteban Ocon also a 7 out of 10. Obviously, lost positions to Verstappen and Hamilton coming through the field. But to finish P9, just behind his teammate, I think another good performance.
Yeah, rounding off the points, Kevin Magnussen, 8 out of 10 I gave him. I thought it was a very good performance from him. And to hold off Tsunoda and then Lance Stroll as well towards the end as well. 8 out of 10 for me.
I've given him just half a point lower. I've given him a 7.5 out of 10. Once again, I thought you're not expecting that Haas to be battling for a top 5 place after qualifying P4, and for him to hold off Yuki Tsunoda and Lance Stroll from getting that final points place was warranted. So a 7.5 for me.
Now, Yuki Tsunoda, I've given him an 8 out of 10, but if we're going to go for Kevin Magnussen for a 7.5, then I'll relegate him down to a 7.5. I don't feel like you can give Tsunoda a higher grade than Kevin Magnussen personally.
I completely disagree.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely. We're talking one of the worst cars on the grid. Haas are better than AlphaTauri, arguably. Obviously, Kevin Magnussen lost 6 places. Yuki Tsunoda made up 6 places. But then again, let me give my thinking. Obviously, you're gonna come at me going right that there's obviously quicker cars coming at him. Yes, I agree. Okay, hold your horses. But I do think that Yuki Tsunoda is just bringing that consistency this season. Obviously, qualified 17th wasn't the best. Obviously, out-qualified by his teammate, which it just highlights that what on earth is happening. What on earth could have happened if Yuki Tsunoda didn't make up those places. But for me, they're missing out on the top 10 by inches. Well, inches, I say inches in paraphrases, should I say. Yeah, I've given him an 8 out of 10. I'm happy to give both of them a 7.5 out of 10 though, purely on their performances. But yeah, I think with the overtaking that Yuki did and with the relegation that Kevin Magnussen endured, two quicker cars in bold 72 aerial writing. Yeah, I'm happy to give both of them a 7.5 out of 10. I think they both had very good weekends in their own respects.
I would argue we both give them an 8 because I thought they were both, they were both exceptional performances. Kevin Magnussen lost 6 places, but there were both Mercedes, both Alpines, Max Verstappen and Charles Leclerc, so kind of have to take that into account as well. So I would argue for both of them getting an 8 out of 10 rather than 7.5 personally.
Yep, I'd agree.
Okay. 12th place, Lance Stroll, 2 out of 10.
Really?
No, I'm not messing around here. I thought it was an awful performance. There's no way he should be getting out of Q1. There's no way he should be getting eliminated in Q1, should I say, sorry. And then only to make up 6 places, where Yuki Tsunoda in front of him made up the same amount of places, and we've just said arguably the AlphaTauri is the worst car this season. Whilst McLaren may have been the worst car at Miami, this season as a whole, you've got to say it's either the Williams or the AlphaTauri that's been the worst car. To make up the same amount of places and not even get past the guy starting ahead of you who was in a much worse car. He's in the second best car on the grid. We have to remember he's finishing 12th. I can't give him.
Okay, I've not gone that harsh. I think I've gone bang average. I've gone in the middle of a 5 out of 10.
5 out of 10. He's in the second quickest car.
Let's put into perspective. We are talking about Lance Stroll. Stroll. The man's not gonna make up as many positions as Fernando Alonso would have if he started there. Let's be realistic. It's Lance Stroll we're talking about. The man can't capitalize on anything. But then again, point. Obviously, but then again, he made up places. We can't say that he's not done anything. He's made up places to be knocking on the doors of the points. He's not. Like, if put into perspective, if he remained 18th or 17th or 16th, fair enough, I'd relegate him down to a 2 or a 3 out of 10. But purely on the basis of making positions and kind of being in and around for points, not far away off the points, it gives me a 5 out of 10. Actually, you know what? Scrap it. I'll give him a 4 out of 10. I'll give him a 4 out of 10 to average it to a 3.
I could settle at a 3 out of 10, but these are the cars he overtook. He overtook 6 cars, or he finished 6 places higher, and these were the cars he finished higher than that he started behind. Nick De Vries crashed on lap 1. Lando Norris got crashed into on lap 1. Guan Yu Zhou and Nico Hülkenberg. Alex Albon, who was on a poor strategy, and Valtteri Bottas. There's the Alfa Romeo, Haas, and McLaren and the AlphaTauri are much, much slower cars than the Aston Martin. And I think that's got to be taken into account. So I'm happy to settle with 3 out of 10.
We'll settle with a 3 out of 10, but I'm not arguing about Lance Stroll. I just don't want to argue about Lance Stroll. The guy is... We shouldn't even be talking about him. Right, let's move on. He's kind of... he's down there.
Yeah. Valtteri Bottas, I've gone for a 6 out of 10. Solid performance, but it's what you'd expect. This is the kind of performance he should be putting. 14th, Alex Albon, I gave him a 7 out of 10. I think looking back, it may have been a bit too nice. He did slump back with a few places, started 11th and wasn't really in contention for points. Was on the poor strategy, but maybe I've been a bit too nice with a 7 out of 10.
I've given him a 6 out of 10. I've given him the same as Valtteri Bottas, I think. Obviously, he was on a poor strategy, but from Alex Albon's expectations, you're expecting him to fight for points regardless of the situation. And I think a 6 out of 10 is as much as I could give him, really.
Yeah. The next two I put for the same grade, Nico Hülkenberg, Guan Yu Zhou. I've given them both 5 out of 10. Yeah. Pretty quiet races from the both of them. They weren't as bad as the 4 below them, but they weren't as good as their teammates. So, yeah, I've given them 5 out of 10.
Yep, agreed for both of them. I don't think I could say much about the two of them. Quite anonymous throughout the race. Well, realistically, they were anonymous. You didn't see much of them. So, yeah. 5 out of 10 for both of them.
Okay, Lando Norris, I've given him a 4 out of 10. I don't know what McLaren were thinking starting on the softs, so they had to do that extra stop. But, he did finish ahead of his teammate. He wasn't lapped. He finished ahead of De Vries as well. So I've given him a 4 out of 10.
Yeah, Also agreed.
Nick de Vries, speaking of him, a 2 out of 10. Started 2 places higher than his teammate and finished 24 seconds behind his teammate. Crashed on lap 1. I don't know what more you can say. Another poor performance. There's a reason his seat is under fire already.
I've given him a 3 out of 10. I've not been as striking as you have. I think it's been very tough for him throughout the last 2 races. Obviously his qualifying performance, I think it made his weekend. But to finish, like you say, 20 odd seconds behind his teammate and you started ahead of him, it's a bit trouble looming for Nick, really.
Yeah. Oscar Piastri, started 19th, finished 19th, 3 out of 10.
Yeah, I've given him a 3.5. Same. I think all 3 rookies have been struggling, and I think all 3 of them deserve pretty much near enough the same ratings from me.
Fair enough, yeah. The only reason I gave for 3 out of 10 is because I gave Norris a 4 out of 10, and obviously he was much slower than Norris, so that knocked the point off for me. And then finally, Logan Sargent, I gave a 3 out of 10 as well.
Yep, like I said, I've given pretty much for all the rookies the same rating. I gave Piastri 3.5, and De Vries got a 3, and Sargent also got a 3 in his home race. Tricky for him. It's been very tough on him, and all the 3 rookies so far this season. They just need to kind of get back into the groove, and I think a triple header will kind of allow them to get into the groove a little bit more.
Yeah, especially because all you can do is focus on the driving, really, isn't it? So yeah, so that will wrap up our review of the Miami Grand Prix. I almost said review of Imola then. No, that'll be coming up next, also this week, our predictions for Imola. Thank you all for listening, and we will see you in that next podcast. And thank you for listening. Goodbye.